Board. All right, I call this meeting of the Transportation Board of the Town of Brookline to order. It is Wednesday, November 12th, 2025, 6:30 p.m. And let's see, can someone call the roll to establish a quorum, please?
Nancy,
Here.
Richard,
Here.
Len,
Here.
and Brian.
Present. Thank you. We have a quorum. We will begin, as we always do, with public comment. If there is anyone who would like to make a comment on an item not on the agenda, you may use the raise hand function, and I'll try to recognize you in the order I see you, and you can make your comment. Please note that we certainly will have comment on each agenda item as they come up. So if you have a specific item you want to talk about, hold it till that item, please. So I don't see any hands. Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll move on to item 3, action on the consent agenda. The consent agenda this evening includes the approval of the October 8th minutes, approval of a policy to issue temporary parking permits for up to 9 months for residents at the family shelter at 32 Center Street, approval of adjusted resident overnight parking permit hours for lot 13, the town hall lot, from 8 p.m. to 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. And 3D, a request by two residents of 5 Elliott Avenue for an exemption to the resident permit parking rules, allowing for a resident daytime permit to be issued for Elliott Crescent. Was anyone like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and discussed individually? Richard.
It's on the Elliott Street, only that I've walked at with the Hayes School study. I've been told by residents there, when you come down Elliott Ave and you hit Elliott Crescent, it could use some additional signage to indicate that it's a one-way turning to your left. People have had a tendency of turning right onto the one-way street at that particular intersection.
Okay,
So that's it. And that's
Dan,
it.
Dylan, Jonathan, note that, please. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll take that as a second and a third. Dan, or someone call the roll, please.
Nancy,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Len,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and Wendy.
Yes.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi. Sorry for my late.
No worries. Thanks for joining. All right, so we'll move on to item 4. Item 4A is member updates. I'll start with an update. Richard and I attended a neighborhood meeting at the Hayes School last week on the subject of Chestnut Hill Avenue and the proposed resurfacing and restriping. It was a very interesting meeting. Definitely lots of opinions on lots of subjects. I think it was good to go out to the neighborhood and hear from folks directly. Was really happy to get out there and sort of see Chestnut Hill Ave and Elliott Street and all the stuff that was to be seen. So really good feedback. We took about an hour and a half of comments. I think folks probably would have stayed there all night if we let them. Very much a lot to say. So this item will come before us soon. We'll have to have a pretty long, in-depth discussion about it, but I do think we can certainly work towards at least some sort of a compromise that almost no one will be happy with. So that's how you know it's a good compromise. So I don't know, Richard, if you want to add anything to what I just said.
No, I think I guess it led me. One question was the speed humps that we approve for around the Runkle School. When are those going in? Because there seemed to be this neighborhood might be a candidate for another project like that down the road.
Yeah, I think there'll be a desire for them around every school very soon. So
I know that I think it's Dan Martin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's in April next year, and we're working out the dates with the contractor, and they're thinking it's pretty short work. So that's coming next spring.
Is the, if I may elaborate on that, is the goal on that to kind of have a project area every year or every other year? What's
Yeah,
the
yeah, I know that there was a second area identified, but we're certainly looking to do as much as we can with the money we have. If we can do more, we'll do it. We can maybe lump two together. We'll have to look at it over the winter.
Okay, would be like there's a goal of like, say, on average, 25 speed humps a year we're looking to implement, possibly, give or
Yeah, I
take.
don't have a number. I think this one was 33 or 34, Dan.
34.
Yeah, right around there, and it came in at $405,000, so they are expensive. I don't know what our budget is for the next traffic calming season yet, but we definitely want to use it all. And we're looking, like Dan mentioned, we're looking at our next round of candidates. Definitely a lot in town that have requested already, and data that shows some of the streets definitely need it. So I'll come to you.
Thank you.
Wendy, go ahead.
Do we, just in terms of cost, do we ever, it seems like we always do the kind of permanent built-in cement speed humps. Is there a reason why we don't ever do the kind of prefab ones that like emergency vehicles can fit between, that have sort of like a break in them that's wide enough for emergency vehicles?
We've used the speed cushions that have the break in the middle. The feedback we've heard from emergency responders is it doesn't matter too much, and drivers actually were driving kind of over the double yellow to try and get at least one tire not on the speed hump, and it kind of made some tricky maneuvering that we didn't necessarily think was worth the trade-off.
And are those less expensive? Like, are there ones without the?
I think the majority of cost
split.
is labor. The material, it's not a big change whether you have the speed cushions or not. This is handwork. They need to be out
Mhm.
there with a shovel and
Mm.
tampering it down, checking the grades, and then re-rolling it. I think that's the main cost to this.
Got it. Thanks.
Aren't they noisier as well? I think they're noisier. Neighbors don't like the noise. But
You know, I've heard noise complaints.
okay, yeah. Okay, any other member updates? Nancy.
Yeah, mine is really just a comment and a request. Our meetings have been overlapping with the Disability Commission. It used to be that, well, their meetings are, I guess, the second Wednesday of every month. And our meetings were traditionally the third Wednesday of every month. This meeting, the last meeting, there's been a number of instances of overlap. Obviously, that means I don't attend as the liaison, but it also means that members of the Disability Commission are not able to attend our meetings. So it's just a request that we try to avoid overlap if at all possible.
Note taken. And I'll be sending out next year's meeting dates for you guys to review. We can talk about it at the next meeting once you have a chance to look at it.
Wendy, go ahead, please.
Just a quick thing that has come up on the Safe Routes to School like discussion, which maybe you've already seen, but were just issues with Davis Road parking for drop off in the high school that and I guess day parking also, that people are having their driveways blocked. People are parking there, so there was requests for either some kind of enforcement or something. And I know that one of the comments that we got was also on the same subject of a different road, so.
Okay. We'll pass that along to the traffic division. Okay, any additional member comments? Being none, Dan Murphy, let's hear from you, please.
Okay, I got just quick couple items from the director's report. I did find a couple typo, and I will send a revised one for the minutes. But I'll just call out a couple of things. Obviously our paving's winding down for this year. We've got some water service work that's going to continue on. as long as we can. They've done a lot on Harvard. They're doing work now on Longwood, and the crew will move next to John Street. And that's Mass DEP requires water service replacements, and they're just getting in ahead of us for next year's work on Harvard. And we're looking at our plan and making sure that they're well ahead of us as we move forward on the 5-year plan. So that's good news. Russet Road is almost complete. They're working at Heath and Tully right now, sidewalk, and the plan is to get it all buttoned in and paved this year. We did take off South Street for this year. We're going to move that into a future contract as part of next year's work. That's that. You mentioned the Chestnut Hill Ave meeting, which I thought was good. A lot of good comments. Let's see, other ones I wanted to mention. We had really good 3 neighborhood walk and talk meetings on Bridle Path. I thought they were well attended. They went well. People got to see and learn a lot about the background and where we're going as part of design. So I thought those were good. Let's see. Oh, the one thing I did want to mention, we have made a little bit of a change on Hammond. We were initially going to do Hammond Street. The road diet there were separated projects, the road diet and then the traffic signal. But we're basically going to lump them both together and have one big project, and we're working through that now, but we're getting that ready for next year. It kind of makes sense to have it all as part of one, just because this will connect it in any case, because we could do the diet, but the signal area itself takes up a fair amount in the middle. So we've decided to go that route, and so we'll get that design done this winter and get it ready for next year. Let's see. I think that's all I had for the bullets I pulled out, but happy to answer any questions if you've got any.
Richard. You're muted, Richard.
Yeah, no, sorry, I clicked it, but I missed it. On the West Roxbury Parkway,
Yep.
I put in for that crosswalk. Justin Lawson at the golf course looking to get that crosswalk to connect the neighborhood by
Yep.
Walcott Road. You mentioned DCR was planning something. It'd be kind of interesting, obviously, based on what they did on the Newton side, if there's any intention of moving something major down towards Horace James Circle.
Yeah, I ran into, I'm trying to remember the guy's last name. He's kind of the overseer of all the projects for them. And he mentioned the one in Newton coming down. And he said that they were looking at our section actively and coming up with what they were thinking, looking at traffic. And he said something about the volumes being higher there. It would be a little trickier to do what they did up north, but we'll see. And obviously we're going to wait to see, and we'll keep asking to know what they're planning on doing for that.
The Arborway project, they're eliminating the rotaries down there because of accidents and everything. And
Yep.
obviously Horace James, is there any pre-discussions as far as making Horace James intersection?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. It's just that, 7 roads coming into one rotary. It's not a great place.
Yep.
But, nope. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. No problem.
Any other questions for Dan? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the 5th section, discussion for action items. 5A is a presentation and discussion of the draft climate action and resiliency plan. I see our wonderful sustainability director, Alexandria Vecchio, is here. I suppose we should give you the floor, ma'am, and you take it away, please.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. I'm Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources. Apologies for my background of boxes. I am moving in about a week, and so you're all seeing a fort of packing materials that are behind me. So my apologies for that. Thanks for making the time and having me here this evening. I've got a presentation that I'll jump into and then open it up for discussion from the group. So I'll just pull those slides up real quick. All right, is everybody seeing the slide deck okay? Great, thank you. So this evening, I'm here to talk to you about the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, which we affectionately refer to as the CARP, and specifically the draft goals, strategies, and actions within that plan. So I'll For those of you who aren't familiar, we are a new division, Sustainability and Natural Resources, within DPW. So I will give you just a very quick overview of who we are and what we do. And then I'll particularly talk about the CARP development process, which we're about 11 months into now, and then focus on the goal, strategies, and actions, and some feedback from you all, in particular focusing on the transportation and mobility section. So the Sustainability and Natural Resources Division, our mission is to develop and execute policies, programs, and projects that combat and mitigate the effects of climate change, and also sustainably manage and protect Brookline's natural resources to build ecological and climate resilience. So I often say that our division has two guiding documents. We're responsible for the creation and implementation of both of those. One is the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, or the CARP, and the other is the Open Space and Recreation Plan, which we're not going to be talking about this evening, but I'm happy to talk to you about at a future meeting or one-on-one if any of you have any questions about that. So our division actually was established about a year ago now. So we're a new team, and since being created, we have updated both the Open Space and Recreation Plan that we are just finishing that review with the Select Board and hope to get the approval imminently, and now are in the midst of the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan. So in general, our division focuses on those policies and programs and projects that have to do with the built environment, particularly as it relates to building, energy efficiency, electrification, renewable energy. We also focus on transportation, particularly our own fleet electrification, EV adoption and charging, as well as micro mobility, focus on zero waste, organics diversion, textile recovery, extended producer responsibility. We have a focus on natural resources as well, including our tree canopy protection and expansion, nature-based climate solutions, pollinator gardens, and then climate resilience and hazard mitigation, thinking about stormwater management, green infrastructure, heat island effect mitigation. So again, there's a lot there that doesn't all relate to the work that you all do, and not necessarily all of that is captured in the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, but that gives you an overview of the breadth of the division, and really speaks to the fact that our work is really working with so many other divisions and departments to achieve shared goals. So the CARP is intended to be a prioritized action plan that will help reduce our emissions and deliver on resiliency solutions. And I emphasize that because I think it's really important to note that it is not meant to be a sustainability plan. It is really meant to be something that is focused on emissions reduction and resiliency solutions. Brookline has many plans and strategic documents in place, and so we are not trying to regurgitate all of those into a new document, but instead are really trying to highlight the projects and priorities that exist that tie into that goal, and then certainly to establish new ones that help us move toward the needle on those things. So we did look at past town planning efforts. I'll talk a little bit about the documents that we looked at. And then we had a stakeholder engagement process that took place primarily over the summer, but is obviously, this is an iterative process, so is ongoing now. So the deliverables that we are working with a consultant on this, and the required deliverables are that they conduct a baseline assessment of our existing climate action plan, as well as any other planning documents that correlate to this one, that they conduct a greenhouse gas inventory with baseline data for us, that they help with our stakeholder engagement process, and then develop a prioritized action plan with what we're calling implementation strategies. So, not just here are what the actions are that we're going to take, but this is actually the pathway for us to take those. And then finally, that they develop a dashboard to help track progress on climate action that we're able to publicize so that the community can follow along on the work that's being done and where we're at. The intention here is that this is a 10-year plan with what we're calling a 5-year check-in. So at that time, will be the opportunity for the community to decide that we need to revisit and update some of those goals, or that we should continue moving forward as drafted and just use that as an opportunity to simply update on where things stand. This is the project timeline. So as I mentioned, we really started at the beginning of 2025. We formed a staff advisory group and then did what we considered our baseline assessment, which was really our greenhouse gas inventory and reviewing those existing planning documents. And then in the spring and throughout the summer, we moved into our public engagement process with public meetings, staff interviews, a public survey, and then this fall began our development of the strategy and the final plan. And that has included an update to the Zero Emissions Advisory Board, who's served as a technical advisor for this plan, and now meeting with some various boards and commissions, such as Transportation Board, to really hone in on areas where you all have expertise and get your opinion on things that are particular to your scope of work. But all the while, still ongoing meetings with that staff advisory group with the goal and intention of having a final vote by the Zero Emissions Advisory Board and then the Select Board in March and April, respectively, of 2026. So this is our greenhouse gas inventory that was developed earlier this year. So on the left side, you'll see what we're referring to as community activities. So these are really the emissions that are the result of people living, working in Brookline. So this is primarily coming from our residential and commercial sector. And then on the right side is our municipal operations. So community activities account for 295,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, municipal operation just under 10,000. And as you can see, the vast majority of those emissions for the community activities come from energy. And so we divide that by looking at both natural gas and electricity. Together, we're at about 62% of our emissions. And then the next largest sector being transportation at 31%. And then smaller components of our emissions come from solid waste, water and wastewater, and then what we refer to as fugitive emissions, which are emissions primarily that are lost in the transition and through the transmission lines themselves or at the emissions that are derived at the source of extraction for those emissions. For municipal operations, buildings and facilities make up about 41% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And then the second largest is what we refer to as the commute, which is actually the emissions associated with Brookline staff traveling to and from Brookline for work. And then we have a portion of our emissions that is divided by our fleet usage. So both our diesel fleet usage at 7% and our gasoline fleet at 10%. And then finally our streetlights at 6%, with a small portion of our waste, our emissions coming from our waste. So just the takeaway here that I'm sure you all are quite familiar with is that the vast majority of both community and municipal emissions are coming from either our buildings and the energy that we use to light them and power them, or from transportation. As part of that baseline assessment, I mentioned that there was a pretty robust policy and plan review that took place. I won't read through all of these for you, but just to say these were documents that we referenced and looked at as we were developing this climate action and resiliency plan. There's a lot in all of these, and all of these are very important documents. So we're not negating the importance of any of these based off of what's in the climate action plan, but instead really kept coming back to that question of, is this helping us to reduce emissions? Is this helping us to build resiliency against the impacts of climate change that we're experiencing here in Brookline? So for the Transportation Board, obviously the Transportation and Mobility Plan is relevant to the work that you all do. Your green routes, complete streets policy, your sidewalk policy, traffic calming policy, all of those were considered. I will also note that the staff team that I mentioned, the working group that has been working on this project, did include Amy Ingalls before she left her position, And since then, we've asked for Dan Murphy to step in and continue to help shepherd that through. So we do have a transportation presence involved in the development of the plan. So this summer, as I mentioned, we did some engagement activities. This is a very quick overview of those, but we held 2 public forums that were in person and really kind of worked as charrettes for the community to think about what our climate solutions would look like in Brookline, and then how would we prioritize those, and how do we ensure that we're looking at those equally and also taking into account other co-benefits and potentially impacts to the community. Then we also conducted a survey that was distributed townwide. We received over 500 responses to that, asked folks to share their concerns about climate change and to help prioritize solutions. And then we conducted staff interviews and held numerous Zero Emission Advisory Board meetings, which are obviously public meetings where we solicited impacts on the development of the plan. So there's lots of takeaways from those public forums. I'm not going to get into all of that with you this evening, but just a couple of quick snapshots for you all to look at here. When we asked, what are the solutions you want to see as it relates to reducing our buildings and energy emissions and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that sector, we heard a lot about adding solar panels on municipal buildings and then helping to support some sort of bulk purchase of heat pumps that then would result in a reduced cost and discount for residents looking to install those in their home for home electrification. For sustainable transportation and mobility, we received a lot of comments around bike infrastructure and then helping to improve access to EV charging for renters, folks who don't have their own driveway or garage. In our survey, again, lots of good information that came out of that, but just highlighting some of the top strategies that we heard about in that survey. And again, I'm just going to focus in on the sustainable transportation and mobility, where we heard a great deal about improving safe walking routes in high density areas. I think generally speaking, when it came to transportation, this was probably one of the sectors where we saw the most focus on goals or strategies that would really have other benefits for the community, and I think safety being one of the top ones that was prioritized. So the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan consists of 5 different categories, and so those categories were reflected in that document that was shared with you all. We have buildings and energy, which is really focused on how buildings are constructed, how they're powered, how they're operated. We have resource conservation and management. That's really about reducing consumption and waste across systems. Then we have sustainable transportation and mobility, how people move through Brookline. We have natural systems and community well-being. That's really focused more on environmental quality, ecological systems, some tie-ins to public health there, really the natural environment. And then finally, resilience, adaptation, and risk reduction, which is preparing for and reducing harm from the climate-related hazards, namely heat, flooding, and building resilience in our energy grid. So those are the 5 categories in the plan. Again, I welcome comments and feedback from you all about any of those, but to prioritize time and make the most use of your expertise tonight, we'll focus in on Section 3, Sustainable Transportation and Mobility. Just going to give you a little definition so that we're using the same language as we talk about this evening. We have in the plan, it's organized around our target, which is basically our overall emission reduction target. So this is a 10-year plan, but it is intended to move us towards a net zero emissions by 2050 in Brookline. Obviously, 10 years from now is not 2050, but it's intended to set us on that right trajectory. Then we have goals. So those are sector specific. And you'll see that those kind of are divided into the 5 different categories that I just went over. And then within each of those goals, we have strategies. So those are these high level steps to achieve those goals. And then within each of the strategies, we have actions. So these really discrete activities that support the strategy itself. So for transportation and mobility, I believe we have 4 goals currently outlined in there. I talked a little bit about this, but just want to touch on it briefly again. Right now, what you're seeing is everything presented is in no particular order. This is just a draft of all the content that's in front of you that we are currently talking through and working with and getting feedback on. After we have that a bit more refined here in the next month or so, then we will go through and prioritize the strategies using this consistent set of criteria. So looking at the cost for the action itself, both upfront and ongoing costs to the town or the community, the availability of funding. So is there money out there, or is through federal, state grants and incentives, private dollars, or existing funds, perhaps through the town budget or a town grant program like CPA, which is Community Preservation Act. Our staff capacity to do this work with our existing resources, or if additional would be necessary. How easily implemented is this, particularly for the residents? As you saw, a lot of our emissions are coming from our residential sector. And so we want to make sure that the solutions that we're offering them are ones that are accessible and things that they can actually do. And then how much of an impact is this having on the climate, either through greenhouse gas reductions or improved resilience to those localized climate risks? And then finally, is there a financial return on investment? So is there cost savings or avoided costs, such as reduced utility bills or things like that, reduced fuel bills over time, that should be factored in. So essentially how this will work is we'll have a strategy like this one here on the left, maximizing solar energy installations on public property. And then we'll go through each one of those categories and give it a high, medium, and low score. And then based off of input from the Zero Emissions Advisory Board, we will have what we call multipliers. So these are, factors that will uplift certain strategies that possess these qualities. So is this having a direct impact on our goal of emissions reduction or resilience, or is it an indirect impact? Us putting EV charging stations out for the public to access would be an indirect impact, while they are there and accessible, and we hope that that would drive interest in an EV and bring comfort to people who are looking to adopt an EV. Doesn't actually reduce, building that infrastructure doesn't actually directly reduce emissions. We also want to make sure that we're looking at equity. So how are the solutions going to be implemented, and how will those impact our most vulnerable populations? And then finally, public awareness is what we're doing, helping to increase public awareness about climate change and about particularly climate actions, making this more accessible for people. So I know that was a little bit of a whirlwind overview, but I wanted to leave the bulk of our time, obviously, to discuss the content itself. With that being said, in addition to this evening, I am more than happy to chat with any of you one-on-one, or if you'd like, return to a future transportation board meeting and talk about any of this further. And as I said, I'm focusing on the section 3 right now. Happy to talk about any and all of the sections with you. You're also welcome to join us for one of our Zero Emissions Advisory Board meetings, which take place on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month. So our 4 transportation and sustainable transportation and mobility goals, as we're in the draft document, I'm not going to read these to you, but really focus on our municipal fleet electrification, the reduction of internal combustion vehicles in Brookline, and then the reducing the number of vehicle trips, so trying to get people out of those vehicles, walking and biking and using other forms of transportation, and then reduction of our staff commuting footprint. Just so you all have a little context, so you are one stop on the tour of the draft goals, strategies, and actions. My tour bus does continue on to a few other boards and commissions over the next few weeks, and so we'll continue to define and refine and develop those goals, strategies, and actions. And then we will work on that prioritization across all 5 of the categories. And then in 2026, we'll return to ZIAB with a prioritized presentation of those strategies, and then do some further refinement and have a draft plan before ZIAB and the select board in March to April of 2026. So this is all that to say, this is not the last opportunity or your only opportunity for input. There are other opportunities in the future. And as I said, I'm happy to take any questions or comments outside of this meeting as well. So on the left here, I thought it might just be helpful if I had folks had the goals in front of them, although I am happy to take this down if you all prefer to just see each other's faces. But on the left side, you'll see the draft goals for transportation and mobility. And then on the right side, I've just included some discussion questions. If you have particular comments or things that you want to share, I'm happy to go through those as well, but thought this could help organize the conversation. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Chairman Kane, and you can let me know how you'd like to go about the discussion.
Well, thank you very much. A lot in there, and you folks have obviously been working very hard on this. So congrats on that, and look forward to what we can say. I guess what we'll do is open it up to the board for questions, and then we'll try to hear from the public a little bit, and then we'll see if there's anything anybody wants to wrap it up with. I guess I'll start, if folks don't mind. One thing that would be really helpful to us, to me, is help with some kind of a decision matrix or a hierarchy, because we are often challenged with do this because it's really good for the environment, or don't do the exact same thing because it's really good for the environment, right? And how do you judge it? So we don't know. I mean, this you heard about the tree and the T station, that whole thing. So that would be really helpful in terms of allowing boards and commissions to have this lens when making decisions. If that was at all something that this plan might create or help at least define a little bit, I think that would be very helpful to this body. Certainly would be helpful to me. We often look at traffic calming and adding more concrete and elements to the public way to slow down cars. The cement itself is obviously adding to emissions, but hopefully the slowing down cars is helping. It's also safer. So, we're always sort of wrestling with those trade-offs. And I guess that would just be very helpful. So that's my 2 cents. Len, go ahead, sir.
All right. I did some research recently about the Coolidge Corner municipal parking lots. The land was taken by the town in the 50s and 60s by eminent domain to build the parking lots. This happened on Center Street, Webster Street, Babcock Street, and John Street. I estimate that more than 100 people were evicted from their homes to build parking. So I'm wondering about these strategies for the following goals from your draft document. Improve urban heat island mitigation strategies on public properties, reduce the number of vehicle trips to, from, and within Brookline by 25% per capita, and reduce emissions from staff commuting by 60% by 2036. Can one of the strategies be to replace parking spaces with green space, like Schenley Plaza in Pittsburgh, and/or with housing? Housing for municipal employees could help us reach our goal of reducing the number of vehicle trips and emissions. I picture my children's teachers being able to walk to school instead of driving there, and they could also patronize local businesses.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were finished or not, Lynn. Yeah, so I think the question of the municipal parking lots and what is the best and highest use of those spaces is probably one that you all have heard a lot about for quite some time. And, just in my 4.5 years with the town, I have as well. So happy to look at adding something that allows us to make sure that we are, for whatever those parking lots are in the future, that they become more resilient to the impacts of climate change and are designed to be more effective for possibly any of our micromobility and different transportation methods as well. So I don't think that type of broad policy move of us eliminating a parking lot in its entirety to move it towards housing or, some other green space usage or something like that is something that we would put into the climate action resiliency plan. That's, kind of a pretty large undertaking, but I think we can make sure that there's something in there that acknowledges that we want to make sure that we have the highest and best uses for those spaces and that it may not be parking in its current iteration or as it's currently designed. So definitely hear and appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. I think it's one of the best ways to address many of the climate issues we have and also address many system-wide problems we have, not just in Brookline, but in Massachusetts as a whole.
Thanks, Len. Nancy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, I'll start where I was saying I am 100% opposed to what Len is suggesting. I think that's really a extremely radical view, which is to say we're just going to, we're going to have a goal to eliminate as many parking spaces as we can. And it sort of leads into my next sort of broader comment, which is your survey identified safety as the #1 concern among those who were being, participating in the survey. And yet I don't see anything in, this plan that focuses significantly on safety and considers safety as an important factor in determining priorities and strategies. And I'll give you an example. Encouraging e-bikes. All right, this is a huge safety concern. There is no current regulation, effective regulation of e-bikes. They pose a tremendous danger, not only for pedestrians, but for other bike users. If the e-bikes are being used in the same spaces as other bikes, particularly among inexperienced users. I recall seeing a memo from the police chief that outlined her difficulty, why it is that the police can't do more to enforce regulations and to try to, do something with the e-bikes. And it's a very complicated situation. The state of the regulation is, it's at the state level. It's unclear what an e-bike is, how you define different categories of e-bikes. So that's just an example of where I think safety has to be a really important concern in looking at any of these particular strategies. I have a number of comments on more, sort of other specific level suggestions. There's a discussion, as I guess it's this action, it's the more specific actions of designating commercial loading zones as to reduce double parking by delivery vehicles. And I would simply note that this is a huge problem, but it's not limited to commercial. And in fact, when I drive around the St. Mary's business on Beacon Street all the time, and it's very rarely that it's a commercial truck. There are commercial trucks. More often, well, I assume you include Ubers within there, but it's not just Ubers. There's any residence. I mean, there's tremendous public parking, and you can put in as many special delivery, and you're still going to have double parking. So I think that's a very difficult concept to work with. I won't list all my specific ones. I'm happy to send comments to someone. I just also want to have, I want to express significant opposition to any effort to promote remote work for these, as a, sustainability goal. I have no objection to remote work for other reasons, in terms of allowing employees some flexibility. There are reasons why some employees are allowed to work remotely and others are not. In general, I find that particularly with public employees, it is really important for them to be in the office as much as possible. And I certainly don't want to discourage having them in the office. My experience and experience of others that I know during COVID was just horrible. You know, people weren't answering their phones. When they answered their phones, they did not have the information they needed in order to respond to the questions. I'm working at home. I don't have access to that information. I'll have to get back to you. I really, really hope that you will eliminate that as a general goal, is to make as many people remote as possible. So I'll stop there. And as I say, I have specific comments. You know, if I'll email them to whoever the appropriate person is.
Thank you. Richard, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Alexandra, how you doing?
Hi, Richard.
Hey, just wanted to touch on just 4 things, and as far as I'll just give you top line, and then whether you answer them or just take note of them. Obviously, no surprise on this one is tree canopy goals. I'd really like to understand that. We have a great gas infrastructure, natural gas, right? And it's a debate as far as like, you know, does that infrastructure really go away? Are we looking at fuel cells as far as generating electricity, you know, when we're trying to electrify buildings? I know Tesla charge stations, I'm kind of biased on this because I own a Tesla, but Tesla charge stations, I don't think there's any of those in Brookline. They're considered the more reliable infrastructure. And then I know we do have some storage when it comes to EVs. They are more sensitive to the environment between heat in the summer and, you know, because the fans have to kick on to keep the batteries at a certain temperature in an electric vehicle, and then vice versa in the wintertime. It has to kick on the heat for the batteries. So they have like a temperature range much more sensitive than a gasoline vehicle. So storage for cars and also town vehicles, like I know the electric dump truck has a problem with charging overnight and more of a problem when it's super hot or super cold out. And you know, and then why it's staying outside, it's burning electricity just to keep the batteries at a certain temperature, even if it's not being used. It'll burn through 25–50% of its charge because of we don't store it in a garage. So it's just something to be mindful when it comes to a fleet and batteries. The sensitivity is they're a little bit more vulnerable as they park outdoors versus inside a garage or a sheltered area. And that's it. So just the tree canopy is the one that I'm kind of curious to hear on, and I just wanted to touch on those other points. Thank you.
Wendy, go ahead, please.
I think I just want to follow up a bit of what Nancy said, which is that I agree that the sort of e-mobility, micromobility stuff is, you know, has the potential to be really dangerous and needs to be planned for. And so I guess I don't have a solution to offer. I mean, I do have a solution to offer that probably nobody would do, but but I think, you know, it's great to sort of have these goals, but talking about how to design for them, like I don't know how you all are thinking about, or how you work with the transportation division to actually design for these things. Like just kind of allowing them and promoting them without designing for them just results in both accidents or crashes and pushback from the public, right? Like a backlash against them, which is what's already happening with the with micromobility. And we saw it when we did the trial with the scooters, Lime, whichever one it was, you know, so there was, you know, some support and then a huge backlash against it. I know right now, yeah. So I guess I just, I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, I thought when Brian said that we kind of deal with these contradictions all the time and wants a decision matrix, and he gave the example of, tree versus public transportation, I thought he was going to just talk about priorities. Like, so what you just heard between Len and Nancy, you can't remove parking, we should remove parking. And we don't have a decision matrix either here when people come and, we come with designs around bike lanes, which are totally in line with everything in your transportation, document. And then a lot of people show up and say, you can't put a bike lane here, parking, and then we weigh that, and it's generally our weight is often around kind of who's saying more and who's louder, and we do have these so-called policies, but we don't really fully make decisions based on those policies. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like, how you do think about design for these things. So if you are, encouraging micromobility and bikes and e-bikes, what's the discussion internally around how to design for those? And I know you mentioned, separated bike lanes, which is great for bikers, but putting e-bikes and non-e-bikes in separated bike lanes together. And then, and also I think in the document was using micromobility for deliveries, which I think is great, but also introduces, we're seeing it happen in New York City, like all sorts of problems. So, yeah, I just think like really having the serious conversation about how we design for these, not just kind of saying that we're going to encourage them, is really key. And actually, I have a question that Dan Martin, maybe I'm curious, when and what was the last protected bike lane installed in Brookline?
Of course, my video doesn't want to unfreeze for some reason, but the last bike lane separated,
Protected.
Jogging my memory here. Yeah. We did a pilot on Lean Clyde with flex posts. That probably was our last one, the pilot on Lean Clyde.
So
there are flex posts going in back on Beacon Street as part of that work there. And then we had the one-way pilot on Kennard that had flex posts as well.
Right. So pilots and often the flex posts, which get knocked down. So my point being that you pointed to all these policies and you sort of brought up the, the policies that then encourage safety, to Nancy's point. But we don't, it's actually, like, I was trying to think, I've been on the board now for, this is my second round. I can't actually remember a truly separated bike lane being that we voted on and passed. So, and for lots of reasons, because ultimately the design, like, people can't figure it out. So so I'll stop there.
Wendy, a lot to think about there. Nancy, is your hand up again?
Yes. Yeah, this is more of a question of what the significance is. If this document, obviously it's going to be revised in some respects, but if once the final document, assuming that it's approved by the select board, what does that mean for individual transportation board issues? So I'll give you an example. I personally am opposed to creating more charging stations simply on the hope that this will encourage people to buy electric cars, as opposed to creating additional charging stations because there are people with electric cars who are unable to get them charged. So in other words, responding to current demand as opposed to taking away parking spaces simply because you think that might encourage people to buy electric cars. But if the select board, if you continue to include that and that is adopted, what does that mean in terms of, does the Transportation Board still have some discretion in terms of if we have a specific proposal for a specific parking lot, is that something we're bound by? Or do we have the discretion to say, in this particular location, it doesn't make sense, this is too high a demand? I just don't know what the effect of this document is on day-to-day decision-making by agencies such as the Transportation Board.
Sure. So I would say that this document is certainly meant to be a guiding document for the town of Brookline and all of our work. And so that affects other departments and divisions, including the transportation division. However, it doesn't, I can't think of a better word, so I'm going to say usurp any of the existing authority that sits with a respective board or commission. So anything that would normally come before the Transportation Board for review and adoption would still come before the Transportation Board for review and adoption. And, you know, same likewise for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and same for the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. So anything that, you know, still has a public review process as part of it, and many things related to transportation would still go through that same public review process. The idea is that the goals and strategies here are helping to prioritize and guide the work that staff are doing, and then that those projects are still going through the full due process that they deserve in Brookline, and is usually quite rigorous. So that would still be happening. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Okay, does anybody from the public want to comment on this at this time? Seeing none, I guess, Alexandra, good luck with, as I like to call it, COP, and safe travels in your move.
Thank you all. I appreciate that. I'll just throw this up here real quick, and I will also share these slides with Dan Squared, Dylan, Dan, and Dan D3. You guys got to come up with a fun acronym for that. But in the don't put it to me, or you'll get with fish name. But for the short term, I'll say that the link to the webpage, if you're interested in following along for the progress and future drafts, is here on the last slide. And then in addition to emailing me, you can also email sustainability@brooklinema.gov. Some of you mentioned having, you know, specific written comments on the draft that was provided. Happy to take those via email if that's easiest for all of you, or certainly to set up an additional call with anyone. Thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I also just want to thank you all for what you do. Transportation is a really big topic. It's a really important topic. And I don't get to see you all a lot at your transportation meetings, but I do greatly appreciate all the time and effort you put in for the community. So thank you. Have a great evening.
Ditto to you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Alexandra.
All right, we'll move on to 5B. We're right on time. Discussion on transitioning parking meters and mobile applications for pay by license plate.
Brian, this one's me. So this is mainly to get the board's opinion on this change. The conversation started a little bit with our pilot. So right now we're testing different meter vendors, and they let us know that other communities are moving away from single space meters and focusing on multi-space meters only. And then the second thing that brought this conversation is the MBTA station accessibility improvements on Beacon Street. We're going to be removing a bunch of meters and either resetting them or hopefully changing it to pay by space with multi-space or pay by plate with multi-space. And just to help share what I'm talking about, I have a short clip I want to share. So right now in town, we have either pay by space, and you can use the multi-space meter or the mobile app, and that's what this looks like. So you have a sign that has your space number, and then you either use your phone or go to the meter and put your space number in. And then the other scenario in town is we have single space meters. So every parking space has its own meter. So in either scenario, we have a pole and either a sign or a single space meter. If we were able to transition to pay by plate, there'd be a multi-space meter, and then industry standard is about a sign every 4 or 5 spaces that just gives your zone number. And then you'd use the zone number in your plate to pay for the parking. And the zone number would be the area you're parking in, and then whatever the rate and the time limits associated with that area. And this gives you the benefit of fewer signs and meters, which gives more sidewalk space and green space and less maintenance. So the question here is, would the Transportation Board support moving to less single space meters and then using pay by plate so every space wouldn't have to be labeled? And we want to start implementing that on Beacon Street if
Okay.
you guys are in support.
Nancy, I see your hand.
So I encountered this for the first time several weeks ago when I had to park in Boston. And I didn't know about this. I knew that, that there's Park Boston. I had the Park Boston app, but I guess they had switched and I didn't know how to do it. I had a lot of trouble figuring it out, but maybe that's a one-time thing. But a couple of issues that came up were in Boston, when I've done it, theoretically, when you use the app, it tells you already what zone you're in, but it's often wrong. And it gave me basically 2 different zones, and I had to figure out which zone I was in. I used it on a day when it was pouring rain. And so for me to, I had to get out of the car, figure out what zone I was in. Meanwhile, I had a bunch of stuff in the car that I was transporting, so I had to make several trips, one to go out and find the zone, then I had to go back and get my stuff. Maybe this is just me not knowing how to use it properly, but is this typical that, because it's supposed to tell you automatically what zone you're in? And is it usually accurate? Because as I say, it gave me 2 and I had to figure out which one it was. So I found it very confusing.
I'm not sure on the accuracy, but I can ask. Passport is our main vendor now for the mobile app. I can find that information out and see how precise it can be. There might be an instance where one side of the street is one zone and the other is another. So I could see that throwing off if you're too close within 2 zones. And then another thing is, if we do place signs more frequently, you would be able to see the zone from your car. But then
Yeah, that would be great. If you could see the zone from your car, that would be really helpful.
Well, wouldn't the zone be preloaded if the multi-space meter is always in the same spot?
It depends. I'm hoping we can configure the multi-space meter so it would work with any zone in town. But right now, the multi-space meters you're right, are set up for a specific area. And in that case, it would already have your zone in it.
Okay.
But I think in Nancy's case, she was paying with the app. So we'll have the option. You can either go to the meter.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Wendy.
So actually, that was part of my question. So Dan, so when you say you go to the meter, so you don't have to pay with the app?
Yep, you'll have the option. We'll have multi-space meters every block or every other block. So you'd be able to pay at a multi-space meter with a coin or credit card if you didn't want to use the mobile app.
So you go there and you type in your license number
In the
at
zone you parked at, yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess my kind of knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I hate these things, because I have been in a number of situations where I borrow somebody's car or I've rented a car or whatever. So you're like constantly putting in new license plate numbers, and it takes time. You have to figure it out. You have to do this and do that. And that's, is just a frustration. And I also was wondering about the manual aspect. I mean, I think there's also a bit of a privacy, like I think for some people who don't, who are concerned about sharing their license plate and where they are. I don't know where the town stands with that, or if there's anything, but I know that there are people who don't want to do that. But I think my biggest thing is just that you can be stuck sort of having to put in different license plates different times, and you go to pay at the booth and then you need the license number, you have to go back, you have to get your license number. So that's kind of my only concern. It's not a big concern, but what I think about.
And we
Thanks,
did,
Ben.
in preparation for this, we did listen to the select board meeting. They had a conversation about license plate readers. We do want to find out Passport's user agreement about if we did pay by plate, if they share that information, or if we can make sure it's not shared with any other parties. And then we want to talk to the police about their policy on when they would use the data, or if it's only for enforcement, or if they'd have to subpoena to get information. So we can follow up on those questions too.
Richard, go ahead, please.
That was kind of like my curiosity, the discussion around, is it Flock, the plate reading software? So that covers that. Other than that, it looks like I would have to start memorizing my license plate when I get out of the car. So
So I have a couple questions, Dan. In terms of how the meter folks would work with the technology, what sort of, is it easier than the status quo? Would it be harder than the status quo? Kind of, what's the process?
The police so far have said they think it's going to be easier. We won't know until we try a block.
Sure.
But right now they use a handheld and it tells them what spaces are occupied. This would show the zone they're in and what plates have paid. So just a little bit of a learning curve. Instead of looking at spaces, you look at plate numbers.
Okay. I've used this form before. I think it's Worcester has it. I want to say Somerville has it. I've traveled to like 60 different communities in the last year, so I forget exactly where it was. And yeah, I had the issue. Maybe it was Lawrence, maybe. Anyway, I had the same issue that you mentioned where you got to remember what your plate is. So I just took a picture of it with my phone, so I have it on my phone. And so that problem went away. So I have no problem with us adapting this technology. It seems like it's where the industry is going. Is there still going to be an option to pay with quarters?
Yep, at the multi-use meter, we'll keep the quarter option available.
Okay, so if you're worried about privacy, use a quarter.
You would still have to put your plate in though.
To put your plate in. Okay. Well, it's a public way. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. Well, I personally, I don't have a problem with it. But that's just me. I've used it before and haven't had an issue. So, any other comments on this item before we move on?
when they can do the test pilot, I guess, this be the next step, or?
Yeah, I think in December, I'll follow up on a few of your questions here, make sure about the privacy issue and the data being shared that's not shared. And then we'll target to do this with the MBTA station accessibility improvements then we'll get feedback from there. And then depending on how that goes, we would expand it or revert it back.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. We'll move on to item 6, which is new business. Anyone have any new business? I mentioned at the beginning, I'd like to have our December meeting be in person at Town Hall. So if anybody objects or has a problem with that, let me know. Nancy, go ahead, please.
Yes, I had a question about the Flixbus, which I saw parked on 2 occasions now. I've seen a bus parked on Beacon Street, just east of Amory, in exactly the same location on 2 different days. And that surprised me because I don't recall that being a place where they're permitted to park. Are they permitted to park there?
I will check their conditions
It's right
and
in front of somebody's house.
yeah, I'll follow up with them on that. I don't know. I don't remember offhand, but I'll figure out why they're doing that and
Yeah,
the
the
phone.
first time I noticed that there was no one in the driver's seat. So the driver had left. I don't know where he was, but he wasn't in the bus. I thought it was just a one-off, and then today when I was walking home, I saw it in exactly the same spot.
Thank you for that.
Good eye. Guess they're hard to miss, in fairness.
Exactly. Especially when you're walking right next to it.
Richard, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Brian, as you know, I'm working on Hayes School, some safety improvements. I mentioned it to Dan, when we were over at the Hayes School this past week, but trying to improve, some parking for the teachers in the rear of the building. Um, Tim Davis is getting together with, Kevin Johnson to see what we could do as far as maybe expanding on that back parking lot. Obviously, probably circle back with, the engineering, with the idea of trying to get about 20 teachers that park out front to park in the rear of the building, therefore minimizing congestion in the front, and then with some speed humps and some raised crosswalks, is probably the big picture as far as what we're trying to achieve there. And then on a simple note, Google Maps has Newton Street alongside the golf course and doesn't name it as the West Rock Street Parkway. So they have like a submission on if you see something that's incorrect. I had been working with State Rep Bill McGregor on a resident off my street about sidewalk issues on DCR Road. So I did filter that to him where he works with DCR periodically. But that was just something I came across when I was putting together the crosswalk for the golf course from Walcott Road. I just noticed on Google Maps, I'm like, oh, this is weird. So anyways, FYI, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan.
Related to the Hayes School, just so you're aware, Brian and Richard, if you're working on that area, they have been issuing permits for the parking lot, and that's migrated to streets. They're going to be coming to the board probably in January to get a formal teacher permit parking program. And the principal's doing a survey now of the teachers to determine how many permits they're using, what streets, and then we'll try and divvy them up so it doesn't impact one street more than the other. And we're also trying to get information on how they encourage alternate forms of transportation as well. So that's
He
coming.
didn't bring that up when we met with ASA and the vice principal, but they didn't mention that aspect of it. So
They
sorry I
just
didn't capture that.
Yeah, they just started the process.
Okay.
I don't know the history on the original permit system, but I think bringing it in line with other schools here will be helpful.
Yeah, they ran their
Yeah,
own.
I think there was a resident that called the police to issue parking tickets because they got sick of all the cars parking in front of his house along Elliott Street there. I think that might have triggered it, but
Yep.
Yep.
And then the other thing is for the history on, well, not history, but I do know looking at plans near the golf course, that side of the road heading towards Horace James Circle is West Roxbury Parkway, but on the side of the road heading away from Horace James Horace James Circle, on the side of the houses, that is
Yeah,
Newton Street and
yeah,
town
yeah.
owned.
Yep, that I know. Yep.
We're going to rename it Richard Murphy Way anyway, so.
Hey, I used to ride my bike when I was 10 years old from Lazzie's over to the golf course to do caddying back in the day. So, but anyways,
both
no,
ways?
just the lower part there is what they got. They got it named Newton Street on both roadways, Dan. So, but anyways.
Okay, anybody have any final words? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you in December.
Thank you.